the dollar for the dollars that men make. And that is not a sustainable situation for our families and for our economy. We do need to have regulations that pay women the same for the same work, and companies need to be transparent about those what the working standards are and what the pay standards are. When we short women, we short families. So that is a situation that we need to rectify.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt?
Well, I don't know many women that make less than men in 2012 America. There may be some pay inequality because a lot of women don't pursue a career as hard as men will. But generally speaking, when people bring up this pay equality, they're saying there should be some standard that people should make a certain amount of money based on some standard that will be set by the federal government, based on education or whatever. Well, as someone that believes in liberty, I believe that there are some jobs that are much more important than other jobs. Some jobs really are a lot more work than other jobs. I mean, we would have no society without plumbers. So if you want to look at the flush toilet and how important that is to a civilized world, then maybe the plumber should be the highest paid person. But the pay standards of women to men, if you look at all statistics, it barely exists nowadays in 2012 America.
Thank you. You have the first response to the next question. What is your position on gay marriage, Mr. Schmidt?
Oh, me? Oh, hi. Marriage is one man, one woman. I know there's people, and I've had discussions, and they say, I had this one woman come up to me on Lincoln Avenue and say, well, but what if I'm not in love with a man? I said, and married people get benefits. I'm like, well, marriage is tough. You got to be able to put up with someone from the other sex. I mean, my wife and I, we battle all the time. It's not major battles, but it's hard being married, and that's why you're rewarded. That's why when you have children, you're rewarded. That's why you have tax deductions. Just because two beer-drinking buddies get together in bed, that doesn't constitute a marriage. Just because some woman who had a schoolmate back in high school and now they're living together, that's not marriage. And I hope all these people find someone in the other sex that they can love. There's a lot of lonely men out there. There's a lot of lonely women out there. You just got to look a little harder, I think.
Thank you. Ms. Wade?
LGBTQ people are people, and the rights and privileges under our Constitution extend to people. And oh, by the way, should not extend to corporations because, my friends, they are not people, and money is not speech, it is property. But the rights under our Constitution should extend to all people. LGBTQ people are people. Therefore, the same laws that apply to people who love the opposite sex should apply to people who love the same sex. And the marriage accords privileges that civil unions do not. So either civil unions should be elevated to the status of marriage legally with all of the rights and privileges of marriage, or marriage should be available across the board. I am for the separation of church and state. I believe that marriage should be the province of churches, but that if civil unions are the province of the civil authorities, there should be the exact same rights accorded under civil union.
Thank you. And Ms. Wade, you'll be the first responder for the next question. Should the rich, including Romney, pay more taxes?
We should increase for the top 1%. Their fair share should be paid, and that means increasing the marginal income tax rate back to pre-1981 levels, which is 70%. In the times in this country which were the most prosperous were when the top 1% paid the most taxes, and they still got to buy their yachts and their mansions and travel the world in their private jets. They still got to do all the things that they wanted to do. But right now what has happened is that wealth has actually been transferred from the 99% of us to the top 1% through unfairness, a lack of fairness in taxation. So yes, the wealthiest among us to the most privileged, there should be a burden to a rising tide lifts all boats, and there should be a higher percentage on the most privileged among us.
Well, I totally disagree with my opponent up here because, like I stated earlier, the 10th commandment is thou shalt not covet. And people, historically confused people, seem to forget the reason America was so booming in the 50s and the 40s, because when the men came back from war, they all got married and they all had a bunch of kids, and they had to build a lot of houses, and it was a booming economy. But even President Kennedy realized back in the 60s that taxes had to be cut. He took the top rate down from 90% to 70%. Then Ronald Reagan took the top rate down to 28%. And we have been in the greatest boom ever. Drive around America, look at the people's houses, and find me someone that's not basically pretty wealthy. I mean, even the poorest among us in America have colored TVs, automobiles. Life is great in America, and their plan is just going to make us all poor.
Okay, Mr. Schmidt, continuing with economics, what kind of solutions do you offer to tackle our nation's debt and falling dollar?
Well, the reality is, and I go along with future President Mitt Romney, is that if you cut taxes, you put people back to work. When you start cutting taxes, like I said, when a company buys equipment, if they can write that equipment off, the value of the equipment in a 2 or 3 year period instead of a 5 or 10 year period, they're going to have more money to hire more people. The demand, there's a pinned up demand going on right now. If you cut taxes, more people will go back to work. You put another 12 to 14 million people back to work, there's going to be more revenue for the government. It just follows. This idea of taxing will just stifle economic progress in this country, and we'll be stuck in the same morass that we're stuck in right now. Like I ask everybody, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Are you better off now than you were 10 years ago? I don't think so. We got to put people back to work with manufacturing right here in the good old USA.
What kind of solutions do you offer to tackle our nation's debt and falling dollar? Failing dollar.
So there's many things we can do to tackle the debt that we have. I mentioned reducing the military expenses by 25% over the next decade. I mentioned the Robin Hood tax on speculative transactions on Wall Street. Both of these represent billions and billions of dollars that need to be redirected. I mentioned raising the tax rate on the top 1%. And stopping subsidizing fossil fuel interests, also billions of dollars. An industry that makes trillions of dollars, we are subsidizing with billions of dollars. So all of these measures would reduce the deficit, would also revitalize our economy because we could actually create jobs that our communities need. And I don't know if Mr. Schmidt has been on the south side of Chicago lately, but it sure is not a wealthy place. And those are communities that need the kinds of jobs and services that this revenue that I'm talking about could generate.
Continuing with that thought,